Let's explore the best non-duality practices for beginners. This evening's lesson is drawn from a good-hearted question found on Reddit. It begins, Buddhism and non-duality, and then jumps right into the deep end. Can someone outline the differences between Buddhism and non-duality, as are there any qualified monks or gurus to teach me personally? So, let's begin with some broad brushstrokes. We're going to start with the boring stuff, then get to the juicy stuff. First, the boring stuff. Non-duality is a label for a specific set of ideas. And it is as if the purveyors of non-duality have been sprinkled throughout the philosophical world. Some are Buddhist, some are Hindu, some are Taoist, some are secular. Not everybody who meditates or philosophizes is a fan of non-duality. Not everybody who claims to have mastered non-duality to the point of being able to teach it understands it as well as they think they do. That's just par for the course. So let's take a deeper look at that for a moment. But wait, before we do, we'll come back to that in a minute. Are there any qualified monks or gurus to teach me personally? Well, clearly you're the person who wrote this is an individual of enthusiasm and chutzpah, and I really respect that. Now, I want to answer, now I want to explore something with you for a moment. Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks, but not in the fun, tingly way. Which, therefore, should not surprise us when the majority of people, even meditation teachers, tend to think that being rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel is Jim Dandy, and look down their nose at the minority who value being flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. Now, the majority of people who have taken a detour on the road to mastering non-duality, or to paraphrase Bugs Bunny, the majority of people who've taken a wrong turn at Albuquerque have done so because they've tried to approach non-duality from a very active, analytical, rigid, controlling way. And they pretty much have run face first into a metaphoric brick wall. The only people who really master non-duality are those who approach it from the worldview of being flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. Now, herein lies a sad and dark irony, so brace yourself. The majority of humans tend to be yang or patriarchal or like the Buddha's foolish cousin Devadatta. And these are the type of people who are so elitist and so controlling that metaphorically they will bite and scratch and claw their way into positions of prestige and authority in whatever field they're in. Therefore, these are the people who will use buzzwords, dog whistles, and when they say, well, you must learn non-duality from a qualified teacher, what they really mean is you can only learn non-duality from a teacher that we have given our seal of approval to. But remember that this is a seal of approval from people who are rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. And their seal of approval may be more of an indictment than anything else. when one reads the histories of the great spiritual luminaries, regardless of ethnicity or gender, the truly great ones, the men and women of fantastic insight, typically have been described by being flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. These people are not salesmen or salespeople. They aren't manipulators. They aren't those who prey upon the foibles of the masses for wealth or prestige and power. These are very, very humble people. Happy to teach, not happy to chase, not happy to control. So, having said that, let's go back to the original question. So, now that we've explored that, now we've explored the buzzword of qualified. Let's ask the question behind the question. What is the litmus test for one who would teach non-duality? And here it is. It's very concise. It's very simple, but probably annoying. So brace yourself. The British used to say that the proof of the pudding is in the tasting. The only way to know whether a teacher is qualified is this. Number one, when you ask for teachings, do they give them to you? Or are they greedy? Are they cruel? Are they manipulative? If they give you teachings, great. But what are the effect of those teachings on your life? When you receive a technique from a teacher, and they explain it to you how to use it, if you apply that technique once every 12 hours for 7 consecutive days, what results in your heart and mind do you notice? Do you notice a diminishing of peace and a diminishing of love? Or do you notice an increasing of peace and an increasing of love? So yes, we have to use the scientific method. If you're an old guy like myself, you may remember that in the late 60s, early 70s, there was a Pepto-Bismol commercial or an Alka-Seltzer commercial where some guy says, I said to the waiter, I've never had Hungarian goulash. The waiter said, try it. You'll like it. I tried it. I didn't like it. So the idea in that commercial is that we have to experiment. There's no safe way to go through life. No one makes it to the grave without at least one scar. So if we don't have the enthusiasm and courage to at least experiment with a technique when we receive it, then we will always be led by the nose by those who specialize in being rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. Now, let's get to the interesting stuff. Let's get you understanding non-duality tonight in this lesson. Here we go. Non-duality was always supposed to be figurative. If people, I can't tell you how many self-important fools have puffed up their chests and proclaimed for all the world to hear that they're so spiritual they can't tell the difference between dog dew and chocolate. Really? Well, if that's the case, I don't want to smell your breath. So, yeah, non-duality has always been thought of, well, it was always intended to be taught figuratively. So here's the problem with figurative language. First of all, we're all prone to figurative language because of how we are wired. We evolved to think symbolically. So it's natural that we go from literal statements to similes to metaphors. And allow me to illustrate this in a manner that I kind of enjoy. First, a literal statement. John is tenacious. All right. Now a simile. John is as tenacious as a dog with a bone. Okay, that's a simile. We know it's a simile because it uses the word as, which is fabulous. Okay. Now we're going to convert that simile to a metaphor. John is a dog with a bone. There's always going to be someone who gets confused and thinks and confuses that metaphoric statement with a literal statement. John is really a dog? Really? He's a full-grown man, but he runs around on all fours sniffing the asses of strangers? Well, I hope not, because such things are frowned upon in polite society. So, just as it is ludicrous to confuse a metaphor with a literal statement, we must explore non-duality figuratively. And the most efficient way to cut through millennia of confusion is to view the Buddha's teachings and techniques through the lens of neuroscience. I'd like to do that with you right now. Okay. Those who tend to be rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel tend to implore their students to actively concentrate and actively analyze. They might even give them fancy Sanskrit terms. They might call it shamatha and vipassana and pronounce it with a Tibetan or an Indian accent. But did you know that the only way to actively concentrate or actively analyze, or both, is to rely upon the discrete structures found in the prefrontal cortex, such as the medial prefrontal cortex or the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex? Now listen. This prefrontal cortex is lovely. Hey, if you want to compare, contrast, analyze, calculate, reason, edit, then, the prefrontal cortex is the tool for you. But like any tool, if you overuse it, you're going to exhaust yourself. If you ignore the symptoms of exhaustion, you can injure yourself. Well, how could you injure yourself with the front part of your brain? Simple. If you overuse your prefrontal cortex, you're going to activate your amygdala, the seat of aggression and anxiety, which is going to further intensify your tendency to be rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel, which is darkly ironic, is it not? But wait, it gets worse. If we ignore the symptoms of overworking our prefrontal cortex, we could begin presenting with symptoms of depression, which I would not wish on anybody. How's about some good news? Every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we are accessing our sympathetic nervous system, which is ensconced within the middle third of our spinal cord. This bad boy has evolved to help us to perceive vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly, which is the opposite of concentration, is it not? Now, I have to be honest with you. It's not all sunshine. It's not all rainbows and lollipops. Because in addition to perceiving sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like, we also will notice emoting, intending, reasoning, recalling, and imagining. Now, some of that is external, some of it's internal, some of it's pleasurable, some of it's painful, some of it's interesting, some of it's boring, some of it's glorious, some of it's grotesque. So I promised you some good news. So here's a second bit of good news. Every time we exhale, and by the way, so every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, whether we feel it or not, we access our parasympathetic nervous system, located in both the lower third and the upper third of that same spinal cord. This parasympathetic nervous system has evolved to help us to physically relax and mentally release, which helps us to become even more flexible, loving, laid back, rational, and the like. And now, a third bit of good news. The more we practice this mindfulness and meditation that rely upon our autonomic nervous system, not only do we sedate our amygdala, but we energize this thing right here. This thing that kind of looks a little bit like a catcher's mitt. This thing that the big kids call the anterior cingulate gyrus. This thing that functions as the hub of our mirror neurons, the seat of empathy and compassion and love. The late Tulku Thondup insisted that the highest love is spontaneous and uncontrived. The more we train in mindfulness and meditation in harmony with our inhalation and exhalation, the more our choices, utterances, and deeds will flow in the effortless effort of love's centered spontaneity. So now that we have a good feel for the science of mind, forgive me if that sounds pretentious, now we can explore emptiness and then non-duality. Once again, emptiness, like non-duality, is a metaphor, and when it's taught literally, confusion ensues. Remember, when we read the penultimate passage of the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha assures us that it is possible to master his path in 7 years, or 7 quarters, or 7 months, or 7 fortnights, or 7 weeks, or even 7 days. You can't get a PhD in 7 days. Therefore, it's sound to reason that Buddha's path is a visceral, easy path. It's not the path of blind faith or pseudo-intellectual skullduggery. So, here it is. Every time we relax into our exhalation, whatever we noticed during our previous inhalation could feel a little bit less permanent, a little bit less solid, a little bit less defining. Not permanently, just fleetingly. But that's enough to help us cope with the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune and help us become loving and groovy. Now let's wade a little deeper into the waters of metaphor. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever we noticed during our previous inhalation could begin to feel, at least a little bit, at least temporarily, as if it was as non-graspable as a vast empty void. Now, any good English teacher will remind you that a simile is only as useful as it is relatable. So we have to ask the question, what is a real-world example of a non-graspable, vast empty void? The answer is obvious, or at least it will seem obvious in a few minutes. How about the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which, although is tantalizing to the eye, is intangible to the hand? You can lie on your back on the grass, reach up into the and extend your hands as far as you can, but you'll never pull back a fistful of blue. I know, I've tried it. It didn't work. So, emptiness is a metaphor of non-graspability. What has that to do with non-duality? Well, let's start with very trenchant, easy non-duality. Non-duality that's not limited to Buddhism. That's even echoed in the Tao Te Ching. So this is one of the overlapping Venn diagrams, one of the many. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever beauty and ugliness we might have noticed during our previous inhalation could begin to feel as if they were both as non-graspable as a vast empty void. So externally, when we inhale, the beauty and the ugly are very, very different. When we relax into our exhalation, they begin to have the same taste of non-graspability. The same can be said about that which is discordant or harmonious, or that which is pleasurable or painful, or that which is delicious or disgusting, or that which is fragrant or foul. As we breathe in, they are quite, as we inhale and notice, they are quite different. As we relax into our exhalation, they are equalized. Now, we must remember the words, the teachings of the great South Indian Buddhist saint Nagarjuna, who reminded people of the two truths, that the conventional and the ultimate are both necessary. The conventional is whatever we perceive during our in-breath. The ultimate is whatever we experience as we relax into our exhalation. They're both necessary. You show me someone who is just so enamored with emptiness that they can't navigate reality, and I'll show you someone who's missed the boat. Non-duality is not supposed to make us a pseudo-spiritual invalid, incapable of delineating the difference between Hershey's chocolate and doggy dew on the sidewalk. So there's the conventional we experience as we breathe in, and the ultimate we relax into as we breathe out. So there's always been teachers who are stuck in rigidity. And because they're controlling and superstitious, they're also stuck in ritual. And there's always going to be a few teachers who are flexible and loving and rational and laid back. These are the people who really get and really promote non-duality. So, for instance, these people here, the rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling ones, they'll be like, oh, you must not think bad thoughts. You must repress those bad thoughts. You must stop yourself from thinking bad thoughts at all costs. These guys will be like, bad thoughts, good thoughts, they're all thoughts. You know, happy emotions, sad emotions, they're emotions. Yeah. Pretty sights, ugly sights, they're just sights. And so there's a much more relaxed attitude. These people were like, well, you shouldn't think at all. And these people were like, man, thinking is great. Thinking gives us something to notice when we breathe in and something to let go of when we breathe out. Hoo-yah for our thinking. And while we're at it, hoo-yah for perceiving and emoting and intending, as well as reasoning, recalling, and imagining. They're all useful on the path. So let's see if we can put this in a nutshell. Here we go. What if enlightenment was nothing more than the mastery of the Eightfold Path? As children, we learn to master brushing our teeth, tying our shoes, riding a bike. Similarly, we can master the Eightfold Path by getting really good at inhalations mindfulness and exhalations meditation. We will experience 50% of the Eightfold Path that is simply loving kindness. Whether it's the loving kindness of intention, the loving kindness of communication, the loving kindness of conduct, or the loving kindness of commerce. The highest loving kindness is one that flows spontaneously and effortlessly, like the effortless effort of joy's centered spontaneity. Sit in mindfulness and you can't help but notice change. You'll notice it whether you want to or not, because sometimes it's really inconvenient. But we will notice it as we sit in meditation and just relax into the three-ring circus that is the here and now. We can't help but notice how images change, how sounds change. In fact, sound is changed. That's how the vibrations work. If there's no vibration, there's no sound. Sensations change, scents change, flavors change. Flavors change from your first bite to your 10th bite of any given foodstuff. They change all the time. That's fine. Our emotions change. Yesterday's tears may be tomorrow's joy. You never know. Yesterday's vow of vengeance may be tomorrow's... consider A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Last night's bah humbug might be tomorrow morning's purchase of the biggest goose for the Cratchit family. Of course, as a vegan, I mentioned the purchase of a goose with some sorrow. But my point is, we're wired for change, whether it's change in emotion or change in attention or change in thoughts or change in recollections. First, we're recalling what we had for breakfast today. Then we're recalling the last time we had a birthday party as a child. Everything's changing all the time. The entirety of the path is accomplished effortlessly through our practice of mindfulness and meditation, including emptiness, including non-duality. This path can be mastered in as little as a week. This has been fun. I do look forward. I think it could be even more fun if together as a team we practice together after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I spent about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each school of meditation so that you would not have to. Welcome, my friends, to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. I suspect it could be great fun if together as a team we explored the latest iteration of the spaciousness of Diamond Mind, composed many centuries ago by Prahe Vajra, translated recently by Yeshe Donden, amplified and adapted by this MOOC Please chant with me. The empty essence is one unstructured and... Let's try this again. The empty essence is one unstructured unborn. And the way of the yogi is like the path of a bird in the sky. How then can we suppose that phenomena actually exist? And now let's practice. Allow me to refresh your memory of meditation and mindfulness. Here's the essence. As we silently, mentally, and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this during our inhalation, vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and feelingly, we could perceive the antics of mind as it perceives, emotes, intends, reasons, recalls, and imagines. Silently, mentally, and as we silently, mentally, and passively recite the one-syllable verb ease during our exhalation, we can relax into mind's non-graspable nature. So remember, the process of mindfulness is passive and spontaneous. We don't force it. We allow it. Pardon me. Oh, won't you please chant with me? Inner and outer phenomena are both the one real condition, which is not an object to be grasped by the conceptual mind. The things of this world are merely names based on mistaken concepts. And so it is we fail to grasp the experience, the quality of the contemplation. Good evening, and welcome to the second half of Thursday evening practice. Oh, won't you please chant the 31st verse of the spaciousness of Diamond Mind with me? The outer and inner spiritual commitments that we take pertain to the constituents and senses of the body, mind, which has never been other than the true condition. There is therefore no benefit in talking about spiritual commitments. So what is this a reference to? This is a reference to morality. The essence of morality is in the bringing of the four bases of mindfulness into the path of loving kindness. There's the mental morality of well wishes. There is the interpersonal morality of kind communication, both verbal and nonverbal. There is the physical morality of nonviolence or kind conduct. There is the circumstantial morality of kind commerce or cooperation. But since the highest loving kindness is the spontaneous and uncontrived overflow of our practice in mindfulness and meditation, then the minutia of rule keeping does more harm than good. Far better it is to have a dynamic practice of mindfulness and meditation that helps us be the person that our dogs already think we are. Oh, that's weird, isn't it? Huh. Please chant with me. Appearances, symbols of the all good, never change and do something other than presence. Never being other than, oopsie. Never being other than presence, appearances, or therefore transformed into wisdom. In the absence of grasping, nothing has a self-identity. Absent rejecting, there is only the quality that transcends speech. So, my meditation in a nutshell, as we silently, mentally, and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this during our inhalation, we can notice the antics of minds, perceptions, emotions, intentions, reasonings, recollections, and imaginings. As we silently, mentally, and passively recite the one-syllable verb ease during our exhalation, we can relax into mind's non-graspable nature. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 10.5 hours, I would very much like to return to tomorrow's early meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.